single day, like I've always done and always will.
Passing these bills on the floor, making yet another stand.
Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Chantel Destra. In New York, about 1 in 4 households are currently experiencing some level of food insecurity. While the problem has been prevalent in the state for some time, the COVID-19 pandemic only worsened it. Now, with federal funding cuts to food assistance programs, many families are feeling the significant burden of the hunger crisis. At the same time, Governor Kathy Hochul is attempting to protect families from EBT card benefit fraud in this year's state budget. State lawmakers and advocates are also pushing for the Good Food New York bill. If enacted, the legislation would allow public entities to spend a percentage of their budgets on food and help generate revenue for farmers across the state. Our Elise Klein has more on the issue.
Following significant federal funding cuts to food assistance programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, state lawmakers and leaders are hyper-focused on addressing hunger at the state level. According to a recent report from the New York State Department of Health, 1 in 4 adults in the state experiences food insecurity. That's about 25% of New Yorkers. Barbara Gwen, Commissioner at the State Office of Temporary Disability Assistance, says food insecurity in the state has continued to increase over the past several years.
So there's definitely a need in our state as well as other places in the country. And we certainly have seen those levels of food insecurity increase since COVID. And I think part of that is just the overall price inflation. I mean, the cost of food has gone up significantly.
President Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill signed into law last July made changes to SNAP eligibility, benefits, and program administration. The changes include reducing funding to SNAP by about 20%, kicking non-citizens off of eligibility, and adding new time limit restrictions for benefit access. Gwen says these changes mean increased hunger in the state.
We have legally present non-citizens who are already pretty strict limits in terms of which non-citizens could receive SNAP, and the bill from this past summer rolled that back even further. So we are expecting around 36,000 individuals to lose food assistance in the coming months because of those federal changes.
In response to the federal changes and cuts, the governor announced last October $65 million in additional state funding for SNAP and declared a state of emergency. The governor also allocated the same level of funding in the state budget from last year's budget cycle for state food assistance programs like Hunger Prevention Nutrition Assistance Program, or HIPNAP, and Nourish New York. These state programs help provide funding for emergency food assistance, food banks, food pantries, and soup kitchens.
And it helps them purchase food and to also purchase healthy food from New York farmers to increase what they're able to deliver in the community. So the state support, as well as individuals' ongoing contributions to those emergency food networks, is absolutely critical for people who may not be eligible for SNAP, but still have a need and have faced food insecurity, and for others that just need to further supplement their food budget in any given month.
The governor also added the state plans to provide some funding for electronic benefit transfer chip cards to address benefit theft and fraud concerns. Many state lawmakers are happy to see this issue being addressed.
We're seeing skimming rampant in the community where someone goes to buy groceries and their money has been stolen off their SNAP EBT card. So transferring to a chip-enabled card makes it 87% more reliable and more secure.
That's critically important if we're investing all this money by the state to make sure that people in need we're accessing those dollars and making sure they don't get scammed out of those dollars, because not only do they not then receive them, but then it's scamming the taxpayers here in New York as well. So I'm looking forward to that reform.
Gwen says the issue is largely caused by a technique called skimming, where individuals put a layover on devices people use to swipe their benefits via a magnetic strip card.
And they're able to get information about the SNAP account and then steal those benefits. So it's been an issue in New York. It's been an issue throughout the nation. One of the best tools we have to combat that is to move to chip-enabled technology.
Krista Hestefer, the Director of Public Affairs for Hunger Solutions New York, says there have been thousands of families who have had their benefits stolen because of this issue.
Over 150,000 New York families have reported benefit theft in the last few years, and that's just what we know about. This has been a horrible, heartbreaking problem. Families get to the checkout line at the grocery store and they discover that their benefits have been stolen through no fault of their own. And right now there's no recourse. There's no reimbursement. There's no way for families to get those funds back.
Lawmakers add the state has lost significant amounts of state dollars because of this widespread issue.
We've lost almost $60 million worth of SNAP benefits just here in New York State. Think of that. $60 million that could feed New York families that need the help. It's gone to criminals instead. So we need to make sure that chip technology gets implemented right away.
Hesdifer says in the meantime, while the reform is planned, New Yorkers can take measures to protect themselves, such as changing PIN numbers frequently and using the EBT Edge mobile app to report theft, freeze, and request a new card. Some state lawmakers say while there are various efforts to address food security in the state, they are concerned about federal cuts in the state's ability to backfill losses.
But I am nervous about the funding for SNAP. I'm also just nervous about food access programs like Nourish New York, HIPNAP, not being funded enough, especially given rising food prices. And people in my district particularly are hurting for food assistance.
The federal government cuts the way they said they are going to cut. There's no way that you can fill every hole, and the people will suffer.
Some state lawmakers recount watching food pantries close in their district because of SNAP cuts increasing demand and putting extreme pressure on their ability to operate.
And it's been really devastating to literally stand in a food pantry on its last day, seeing lines out the door, primarily of older New Yorkers, and having to tell them that this pantry will not be open in perpetuity because of the Trump administration.
Some food banks in the state are asking for $150 million in funding for both Nourish New York and HIPNAP, $75 million in each program. Gregory May, their Director of Government and Community Relations at Island Harvest Food Bank on Long Island, says this will help them fill the increased needs of communities.
It will help, right? Food insecurity is getting worse, not better. Island Harvest distributed about 10 million pounds of food prior to the pandemic. We're up to about 21.2 million pounds of food now. But we don't have stock at the end of the year. Every pound of food that we get is going out to someone who's a neighbor in need of ours. So any additional dollar is going to help us, but we do need more funding to be able to make, to combat food insecurity effectively.
Natasha Pernica, the Chief Executive Officer of the Food Pantries for the Capital District, says they are also pushing for $150 million for HIPNAP and Nourish New York, highlighting the Capital Region has seen an increase in food pantry use, especially for older adults.
We just got our 2025 stats back, and the largest increase in percent of use of food pantries was older adults. So we know that limited and fixed incomes are just not going as far as they used to. To that point, we want to make sure that food pantries and other frontline community-based food providers have the resources that they need to keep their shelves stocked with healthy and nutritious food.
Some state lawmakers say they plan to push for more funding for these programs.
Years I've always been pushing for increases in funding, especially knowing that food prices were rising. I thought we should rise at least commensurate with the rate of inflation.
Well, I mean, I think we always need to increase that level of funding, and I hope the discussions that be happening as the budget starts to really be negotiated, we'll see that. I think what we sort of kind of seen so far with the proposal from the governor and her budget, there's a lot of flat in there, which means there's room for improvement.
Assemblymember Donna Lombardo, a Democrat representing parts of Broome County and the chair of the Agricultural Committee in the lower chamber, says in light of the cuts at the federal level, the state has an obligation to step in and fill the gaps the best they can.
So I can't underscore how important this is, given what's happening to our SNAP benefits. You can't take away, number one, that many dollars from the SNAP benefit and not expect it to negatively impact the one place people have come to expect to find food. And if that place is empty, I'm really not sure how to even approach that.
Some other state lawmakers, like Assemblymember Gary Pretlow, Democrat representing parts of Yonkers, chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and who has helped lead budget hearings, says he doesn't think funding for these programs will be too difficult this year.
This fiscal year, we're in good shape, and we will be able to find the money. Next year, when the Medicaid cuts really hit us, that might be a little bit more difficult to do. But right now, I'm pretty sure that under the governor's proposals, we're going to do well in the area of food distributions.
And other lawmakers echo this sentiment, saying funding is always a challenge, but they're optimistic.
It doesn't matter, especially when it comes to social services, because people tend to think that when you're social services that you're just giving things away instead of understanding that you're actually in the assisting communities, lifting up communities. But I think we're all going to be fine this year. The funding that we're asking for, I think we'll get most of it.
Some lawmakers add this is an issue with bipartisan support, meaning many legislators will work together during budget talks.
Programs like HIPNAP and Nourish New York, there is generally bipartisan support to adequately fund those programs to make sure they help the people that need to be helped.
Some state lawmakers and advocates are also pushing for policy reform to address not only food security, but the quality of food provided to the public. The Good Food New York bill would make changes to municipal laws related to food purchasing contracts. Some advocates stress food insecurity is an issue that could be better tackled by relying more on state resources.
The key is that we need to not be so reliant on those social safety nets. And so we are working to address the root causes of food insecurity and some of these other issues related to our food system so that we can cultivate a broader food system that is there for our communities. And when we have issues with cuts at the federal level or the COVID-19 pandemic, we aren't scrambling, but we have the resources locally to feed our folks and to make sure that everybody has what they need.
Gilbert Overland says the Good Food New York bill would help the state achieve this by allowing public institutions to spend up to 10% on food. Iris Van Gillingham, a farmer who recently started running a food pantry, says many farmers in New York could be contributing more to public food systems and improved nutrition.
We want to get more fresh local food into food pantries and schools. We want to make sure that people in all communities have access to healthy food.
The bill passed both chambers in the last legislative calendar year in 2024, but was vetoed by the governor. This calendar year, the bill has been reintroduced with some changes, such as focusing some of the bill language around local New York farm suppliers. Senator Murray, who voted against the bill in 2024 and now this calendar year co-sponsors it, says this change is what changed his mind about supporting the policy reform.
We localized it. Before it was a bit broad, and while absolutely I want good food, I want to make sure that we're benefiting farmers in New York, not necessarily out of state. So the focus on bringing it in state, I think that was the big deciding factor, and I think it's a great program.
Time will tell if this bill passes both chambers again and if the governor approves these changes. Moving forward, the state legislature is at the tail end of their budget hearings, which means they are gearing up to propose their amendments to the governor's executive budget proposal. Negotiations then begin in earnest. The final budget is due April 1st. Elise Klein, New York Now.
And for more information on food insecurity in New York, you can visit our website. That's at nynow.org. In this next segment, we'll dive into the latest news on the impending gubernatorial race between incumbent Governor Kathy Hochul and Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman. We'll also dive into the major leadership changes in the state legislature. David Lombardo of WCNY's The Capitol Pressroom and Politico's Nick Reisman sit down for an in-depth reporters' roundtable on that news. Here's that conversation.
Well, thanks so much for making the time, Nick. I really appreciate it.
Good to be here.
So looking at my list of things from early February, we've got Governor Kathy Hochul picking a running mate, the Republican nominee for Governor Bruce Blakeman picking a running mate, the potential challenger to Kathy Hochul on the Democratic side, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado dropping out. We've got the Assembly Minority Leader stepping down from his leadership post and someone filling that spot. We've got the Senate Deputy Majority Leader announcing he's going to retire, setting up a game of musical chairs for 2027 and beyond. So a lot of things are happening. Anything stand out in terms of being particularly substantive, either in the short term or long term for Planet Albany?
I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, now heading into almost a month now, is this has been something of a pretty good political moment for Kathy Hochul. Her poll numbers are actually increasing a little bit. They're still not where I think anybody would want them to be, but she is certainly better than she has been over the last several years that she's been in office. Number one, she picked Adrienne Adams as her running mate, despite this mini revolt in Brooklyn that lasted about 48 hours. It was a selection that appears to be widely praised. I think she's hoping that third time is going to be a charm with her running mate after the Brian Benjamin and Antonio Delgado disasters, if you will, with those selections. And then at the same time, you have had a Republican candidate, quite frankly, who has been kind of bumbling out of the gate. It's obviously shaping up to be a pretty bad year politically for Republicans, considering that they're the party in power. President Trump is increasingly unpopular. His mass deportation campaign is increasingly unpopular and potentially is going to be facing some voter backlash as well. Meanwhile, here you have Governor Kathy Hochul, who has been proposing a bunch of measures meant to put guardrails on ICE and on those other federal immigration efforts. That's got a lot of approval with voters. And then at the same time, you have had a Republican campaign that's had a lot of self-inflicted wounds. Blakeman still has not closed a deal to a certain extent with a number of upstate conservatives, people who were super fans of Elise Stefanik and really wanted her to run for governor and feel that he elbowed her out of the race. And then you have this debacle, quite frankly, with the lieutenant governor selection, where initially he was all set to pick Fulton County Sheriff Richard Giordino. That lasted about the length of the Super Bowl, and he had to essentially bow out. And then he picked another rural sheriff, Madison County Sheriff Todd Hood, seemingly making it seem interchangeable about who he was going to select as his running mate. So in that sense, it's really not going to have a lasting impact, I think, about who these running mates are, because let's face it, most New Yorkers don't know who these people are, but it kind of adds up to kind of a cumulative number of problems for the Blakeman campaign and some cumulative successes for Kathy Hochul.
Yeah, and I want to underscore what you're saying there, because this is a blue state. It's a midterm election where Republicans are in the White House, so things are historically worse off for them. And Governor Kathy Hochul has, in technical terms, a boatload of money already. So Republicans need to run a perfect campaign to beat all those challenges. And what we're seeing is not a perfect campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I've made the analogy before, and I stand by it. It's very, very difficult for a Republican to win statewide in New York. It hasn't happened going on 24 years now. The last time was in 2002 when George Pataki won a third term. It's not impossible. It's basically a shot from half court in basketball. You got to have a lot of conditions that just simply will go your way. The closest guy to do it was Lee Zeldin back in 2022, and that was 6 points. This isn't horseshoes. You know, close doesn't count at the end of the day. You got to get to 51%. And Kathy Hochul now has about 5 years or so, 4.5 years, on the job. As you said, she has been raising at a pretty significant clip. She's going to have to return, by the way, some of that money because she had been planning for the primary that never actually materialized. But at the end of the day, she's going to have a fundraising advantage. She's got the Democratic enrollment advantage. She has the advantage of Donald Trump being deeply unpopular in his native state. All of these things are going to add up to a pretty successful year at this rate, at this very point in time for Kathy Hochul.
Well, let's talk about a name that's not going to be governor, and that is Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, who dropped his campaign essentially a few days after some things really did not go his way, and that included the New York City mayor endorsing Governor Kathy Hochul, and then the New York Working Families Party, a progressive third party, saying, we're not going to endorse Delgado, we're not going to endorse Hochul, we'll just see what happens.
We're seeing an interesting degree of pragmatism from the left flank of the Democratic Party right now. You know, Zoran Mamdani obviously has a lot of stuff that he still needs to get done in Albany to show that he has had a substantively successful first year in office. Obviously, there's a lot of skepticism that a 34-year-old Democratic socialist can govern the nation's largest city, and he really does need Kathy Hochul on his team. So he has made the calculated decision to endorse her early on in this process before the budget is even remotely close to being finalized.
Yeah, giving up a lot of leverage.
Endorsing her over Antonio Delgado, who is polling, I think last I checked at the Siena University poll, like around 11% or something like that. So it was easily considered a long shot. And then you have the left-leaning ballot line, the Working Families Party, declining to weigh in at all and essentially putting in a placeholder there. And that reflects a kind of pragmatism that we really haven't seen from the WFP in the past, when they had gone to war with Andrew Cuomo by essentially announcing that they would back Cynthia Nixon, one of his left-leaning primary challengers, back in 2018. This time around, they're essentially saying, we're just going to stay out of this entirely. And that reflected a certain degree of understanding that, A, Antonio Delgado was highly unlikely to win that June primary. And at the same time, maybe they try to exert some leverage over Kathy Hochul during the budget process ultimately. But she really doesn't need the Working Families Party ultimately going into, certainly not going into June, and maybe even not even going into the November general election. The WFP does need a name on that ballot in November because they want to retain their ballot status.
Yeah, and what you're saying is really important there, because if the governor makes a calculation that I don't need to be on that ballot line to win in November, whoever the WFP is going to nominate, unless it's Jesus, it's probably not going to get that threshold that they need to retain that automatic ballot access, which is what makes them a force to the degree that they are a force in New York politics.
Right, you would need somebody with very, very high name recognition in order to, I don't know if it needs to be on the magnitude of the Lord, but
maybe Aaron
it does
Judge.
need to be, well, ask some Yankee fans, it may be equivalent, but it does need to be someone who does have like remarkably high name recognition, but at the same time that would ultimately be kind of a Pyrrhic victory if they were to do something like that, because Kathy Hochul, at least at this point, again, where we are sitting right now, is on a glide path to the Democratic nomination and is heavily favored to win in November.
So a change that most New Yorkers are not going to feel, but one that we noticed in the Capitol, is the Assembly Republican leadership. And Assemblymember Will Barclay has announced that he's not running again. He's been in the leadership post for about 5 or 6 years now. And instead of being a lame duck leader, he's stepped down in February. And Long Island Assemblymember Ed Ra, who's been around for a while now, is going to be stepping in as leader. What, if anything, are you watching for with that? Because for context, for viewers, the Assembly Republicans make up a teeny tiny portion of the Assembly and thus don't have a lot of power there. So what, if anything, are you expecting from Ed Ra?
Well, one thing I think is notable here is that now you have almost all of the legislative leaders, save for Senate Minority Leader Robert Ortt, who is from the Buffalo area, from Western New York. Now they are all from the New York City region, from the downstate area, from the metro region, from the MTA service area, whatever you want to refer to as downstate. That is now virtually, I think, 3 out of the 4 leadership positions in the legislature are represented by downstate lawmakers, obviously the governor's from Buffalo. But it's interesting that they went with a Long Islander, considering just the amount of power that Long Island Republicans currently have in the Republican Party in New York. You look no further than the nomination of Bruce Blakeman, the Nassau County executive, to run for governor. In large part, this nomination is about ensuring that you've got a lot of down-ballot success, primarily in the New York City suburbs on the GOP side. It may not even be about winning the statewide election. I think Ed Ra's rise to the minority leader post, you're right, it's a powerless position, almost as powerless as the lieutenant governor's job. But I think this is kind of about a broader story of how Long Island Republicans are kind of resurgent right now on the Republican side of things in New York politics. The big difference, though, is when they were last at the height of their power, we're talking like the Al D'Amato years, they were able to elect statewide candidates. And these days, the best you can do is not Senate Majority Leader or Assembly Speaker, certainly not Assembly Speaker. Republicans haven't held control of the Assembly in more than half a century at this point. But we're really talking about just what sort of post they can grab. And that now is like these legislative leaders' jobs as well.
Yeah, and what the role is really primarily responsible for, it seems to be 2 things. One, you are the voice of the Assembly of Republicans, right? But second of all, there are things that these members need to bring home to their districts. There is some nominal amount of money that the Assembly Democrats allow Assembly Republicans to bring back, and there's some nominal amount of local bills that they are allowed to pass. And I think that is only happening if the Assembly Republican leadership is in good terms with the Assembly Democratic leadership. And Assembly Minority Leader Will Barclay had a notoriously good relationship with Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie.
Right, and Hastie even put out a statement basically congratulating him on, what a wonderful run, and you were a great partner to work with. He ribbed him a little bit. It's something you don't really necessarily see in politics these days, but it is a reminder that unlike in the House of Representatives, say at the federal level, where even in the minority, Democrats can shape legislation, can withhold votes, and that has actually led to some government shutdowns, including the most recent ones. But in the state assembly in Albany, and the state senate for that matter, it really is a top-down institution controlled by the majority parties, winner take all. And one of the reasons why Republicans are so mired in the minority over the last half century or so is because of the amount of power that is vested in that Democratic majority. And if you upset the Assembly Speaker by making it some sort of quixotic goal to capture the majority somehow again, that is a one-way ticket to losing office space, losing money, losing out on jobs. And a lot of GOP leaders, not just Will Barkley, but a lot of GOP leaders over the years have made a similar calculation.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Of course, great to be here.
And for more information on this year's gubernatorial race and the leadership changes at the state capitol, you can visit our website. Again, that's at nynow.org. Well, that does it for this edition of New York Now. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.
Funding for New York Now is provided by WNET,